Isaac Asimov is a classic of science fiction. His laws of robotics can be found in thousands of works by modern science fiction writers. And his Psychohistory has every chance of being reborn as a very real scientific discipline. The writer was born in the young RSFSR. The exact date of his birth, somewhere between October 1919 and January 2nd, 1920, was not precisely recorded even by his parents. The writer himself later adopted January 2nd, 1920, as his birthday. The Jewish family of Yuda Aronovich Asimov lived in the small town of Petrovichi in the Smolensk Governorate. They owned a mill and, by the standards of the time, could be considered fairly well-to-do. In 1921, the son, Isaac, and 16 other local children contracted bilateral pneumonia, after which only the miller's son, Asimov, survived. Whether this or something else influenced the family's decision to emigrate to America remains unknown. In any case, in 1923, the Asimov family took advantage of the last pre-war opportunity and left Soviet Russia forever. Nevertheless, America is a free country, and nothing could prevent a young, promising Jew from receiving an excellent education and becoming a doctor of science in biochemistry. Isaac Asimov authored more than 120 scientific and popular science works, and yet it was not for these achievements that Asimov became world famous. From early childhood, Isaac gravitated toward fantasy. Unlike his predecessors, he moved the action of his works beyond Earth and the foreseeable future. This allowed him to create stories that, even under conditions of excessive politicization, remained conditionally acceptable to most regimes in the modern world. Publishers liked this, and Asimov began to be published as early as 1939. Asimov has several grand projects. One of them is the Foundation series. Begun in 1942, this colossal epic stretched across almost the entire life of the writer. Moreover, in the final books of the Foundation series, Isaac Asimov elegantly tied all of his novels into a single overarching chronology. For now, however, we will examine the times of decline and attempts at revival of the vast galactic society described in the novels of the Foundation series. Ready? Perhaps it is worth saying a few words about the Empire of Trantor. Long ago, humanity rendered Earth, the cradle of humankind, uninhabitable. Several thousand years passed, and people who had settled across countless worlds eventually united into a galactic empire with its center on the planet Trantor. The Trantorian Empire emerged around the year 8500 of the Common Era and existed for about 3,500 years, eventually transforming into what was simply called the Galactic Empire. However, sooner or later, any empire falls into decline, and the Trantorian one was no exception. In fact, the beginning of the empire's agony falls in the 120th to the 121st centuries of the Galactic Era. In the year 11,988, Harry Seldon and the future last emperor of the Entune dynasty, Cleon I, are born, and this is where our story begins. In the year 12,010, Cleon I inherits the throne, along with a crumbling empire and a very strange first minister. Perhaps it's also worth saying a few words about Harry Seldon. This mathematical genius was born on the planet Helicon in the Arcturus sector. His father was a farmer who grew tobacco. However, there are reasons to conclude that Harry's abilities are directly linked to secret genetic experiments conducted by R. Daniil Oliva. And the letter R in the experimenter's name hints that he is, in fact, a robot. We will encounter this character more than once. In the recent 20,020, Harry Seldon publicly presents his psychohistory at the Decennial Mathematical Congress on Trantor. The idea appeals to Eto de Merzel, the first minister, and he persuades Harry to engage in practical science. In reality, behind the guise of Minister de Merzel and the reporter Cheddar Hummin hides the robot Daniil Oliva. Interestingly, the theory developed by Seldon ultimately forces him into hiding, but nothing can stand in the way of a scientist's pursuit of truth. A long flight through Stirling University, Dal Y, and Mycogen becomes fuel for deeper research. During this time, Harry meets his future adopted son Raish and Dors Venabili, who is destined to become his wife. Even understanding that Dors is also a robot, Harry Seldon sincerely loves her and marries her. They adopt the boy Raish. Seldon, together with Hugo Amaral, continues working on psychohistory. 8 years later, Seldon is still working on his psychohistory, but now he already sees it as a tool for influencing the natural course of events. These studies are strongly supported by Eto de Merzel. Meanwhile, here on Trantor, a certain Laskin Joranum is gathering supporters with the goal of overthrowing Prime Minister de Merzel. His appeals are full of promises of social justice. Joranum's actions could lead to civil war with the fall of the Empire, which does not fit into Seldon's plans, since it could harm his work. A way must be found to neutralize the rebels and their leader. In the process, de Merzel resigns, and Harry Seldon becomes Prime Minister. In principle, the position of Prime Minister itself is needed by Seldon in order to continue his grand work on psychohistory. The obvious decline of the Empire should lead society to a regression into barbarism. Seldon and his assistants attempt, on the basis of the new science, to predict these events and shorten the dark ages of humanity. However, deep immersion in politics seriously distracts Harry from his main work. In the year 12,030, Joranum's followers raise their heads again. Seldon's adopted son Raish voluntarily offers to infiltrate the ranks of the conspirators, but he's quickly identified. For Raish, this ends in brainwashing, and for Harry, in an assassination attempt that is thwarted by his wife, Dors Venabili. In the year 12,038, a military junta kills Emperor Cleon I and seizes power. Harry Seldon is forced to leave the post of Prime Minister. In the year 12,042, Ludovic Trema and Lin Chen create the Commission of Public Safety. While the junta remains in power, the leaders of the new structure stay in the shadows. Their time has not yet come. Harry Seldon once again immerses himself in science, working on the mathematics of psychohistory. On the anniversary of the 60th birthday of Harry Seldon, the conspirators resurface once more. The target of Tamwal Elar is the celebrant himself, but once again he is saved by Dors Venabili. Unfortunately, in the process, she violates the first law of robotics. We do remember that she is a robot, right? Dors kills Elar and perishes herself, deactivated by his weapon. However, a robot cannot truly die, unlike Elar, and Harry Seldon was not the only one who knew what his wife really was. The year 12,048 was marked not only by the attempt on Seldon's life and the apparent death of Dors. The latter is secretly taken away by de Merzel Olival to a distant world for repairs. The most important event of this period is the fall of the junta and the ascension to the throne of Emperor August XIV. However, his role was purely ceremonial. Some call the ensuing period a true democracy, but in reality, under the guise of a constitutional monarchy, the empire is ruled by the Commission of Public Safety. The role of the puppet emperor is exclusively representative. Meanwhile, life in the dying empire goes on. Mentalist abilities are discovered in Wanda, the daughter of Raish Seldon. This seems important to Harry Seldon for his future plans. The fact is that the science developed by Harry unequivocally leads him to the conclusion that the collapse of the empire is imminent, and humanity is facing a descent into barbarism for many thousands of years. Seldon and his team develop a plan to preserve knowledge and revive the empire. For their purpose, it is planned to create a certain foundation, destined to become the basis of a new civilized society. Already shortly before the death of his associate, Hugo Amaral, Harry Seldon shares the second part of his plan. In fact, it is necessary to create yet another foundation. Here, psychohistorian mentalists with telepathic abilities will work. Their task will be to guide the new development of society in the right direction. However, while the scientists are engaged in science, political life continues as usual. In the year 12,060, the puppet emperor August XIV is overthrown, and the Commission of Public Safety comes to power completely officially. Despite the fact that in an empire experiencing even greater problems, some begin to blame Seldon for the impending disasters, this does not trouble the scientist. His plans extend far beyond the present. In fact, he himself provokes the exile of his Foundation project to the planet, Terminus. The Commission of Public Safety puts Harry and his new associate, Gal Dornick, on trial. If only someone had realized that this was precisely what the scientist had calculated. In the end, everything happens exactly as he planned. The Encyclopedia Foundation moves to Terminus, and the second Foundation is organized on Trantor. The Empire is bursting at the seams, but Seldon manages to bring his plans to life. It is only a pity that he himself is not destined to enter the era of the Foundation. He is found dead at his workplace at Stirling University. In the year 12,069 of the Galactic Era, the era of the Foundation began. In fact, it began with the death of its creator, Harry Seldon. However, a world ruled by scientists still did not come to pass. The parts of the fractured empire not only fell into barbarism, but quite logically created new kingdoms and began to conquer space. Only 50 years after the creation of the Foundation on Terminus, the planet found itself under threat from the neighboring kingdom of Anacreon. A strong political leader was required to resolve the situation. Such a leader was found in the person of Salvor Hardin, the mayor of the city of Terminus. This politician, seeing the real state of affairs, removes the Board of Trustees from power and takes the burden of authority upon himself. Hardin is helped by the fact that the true purpose of the Foundation created by Seldon is finally revealed: to preserve the scientific heritage of humanity amid the internecine-stricken fragments of the Empire. A talented politician, Salvor manages to resolve the crisis without bloodshed. All the scientific achievements of the Foundation are presented by Hardin to the enemy as miracles. In fact, in a certain sense, he creates a new religion, where the scientists of the Foundation act as priests. Such a policy, combined with the scientific and technological superiority of the Foundation, helped the society of Terminus survive among bloodthirsty neighbors. Moreover, the new religion eventually helped the Foundation absorb the four kingdoms: Anacreon, Smyrna, Conome, and Daribo. For self-defense, this would have been enough. But for the expansion into the former empire planned by Seldon, it was not sufficient. And this is where the traders enter the scene. After all, who else would bring the light of technology to the masses, not forgetting about their own profit? Hober Mallow, a trader, arrives in the Republic of Corel. There he discovers that a certain part of the Galactic Empire still exists, although it lags behind the Foundation technologically. Exclusively, though, methods based on trade practice. Mallow, now mayor, serves Corel's ties with the Empire. The Republic surrenders to the Foundation without a fight. The expansion continues, and its main driving force is the trade in miracles. 200 years of the era of the Foundation. The time that has passed can quite reasonably be called a golden age, because in accordance with Seldon's calculations, his creation strengthens its position and expands. Nevertheless, according to those same calculations, the time has come for another crisis, and it arrives from the side of the Empire, which, although having lost 2/3 of its former extent, still continues to exist. General Bel Rios arrives on Suena in search of information about certain magicians. Of course, this refers to the Foundation with its technologies far more advanced than those of the Empire. Here, a certain scholar, Ducambar, is forced to share with Rios information about Harry Seldon, his psychohistory, and the Foundation itself. Naturally, the general comes to the conclusion that the Foundation poses a threat to the Empire. He launches a quiet, successful military campaign against Terminus, but falls into a trap predicted by Seldon's psychohistory. Had the Empire not been in decline, the Foundation would have fared badly. But the aging Emperor Cleon II does not trust an overly successful general. Two prisoners, Bar and the Foundation trader, Devers, by prior arrangement aggravate the situation. They convince the Imperial Secretary, Broderick, that Rios is planning to overthrow the Emperor with the help of the Foundation's magic. Moreover, in their version, the general might very well succeed. Broderick decides to ally himself with Rios, even though the Emperor has denied the latter reinforcements. As a result, both power-hungry figures, Rios and Broderick, are recalled to the Empire and executed for treason. Finita la commedia, and the crisis resolves itself, exactly as Seldon had predicted. After the story with the general, an unforeseen factor intervenes in Seldon's elegant theory: a certain mule. A mutant capable of controlling the emotions of those around him, conquers independent worlds, gradually advancing toward the Foundation. His appearance does not correspond to the plan at all, and is therefore quite capable of sowing panic. The problem for the Foundation is that it has itself turned into an oligarchic tyranny. Within it, a conspiracy of independent traders, dissatisfied with the current state of affairs, is maturing. The leadership of the Foundation, sincerely believing that the plan accounts for everything, misses the threat posed by the mule. Psychohistory operates with masses, but is incapable of predicting the exceptional influence of individual, striking personalities. It is precisely on this rake that the Foundation steps. The historian Beta Darrell and her husband Toran meet a certain Magnifico, who claims to be a runaway jester of the mule. The psychologist Ebling Miss joins the company. Together they attempt to uncover the nature of the mule's power, while he meanwhile manages to seize Terminus. The group has no choice but to flee to Trantor in search of the Second Foundation. At the moment when Miss finally manages to deduce where their goal is located, Beta kills him. She realizes a most unpleasant truth. Their companion Magnifico is none other than the terrifying mule himself. Beta and Toran manage to escape this ordeal alive, but they are powerless against the mule's telepathic strength. In fact, the ruthless conqueror lets them go, harboring an irrational weakness for Beta. The great plan of Harry Seldon, which those on Terminus strive to follow, is not nearly as simple as it seems to the functionaries of the Foundation. The Second Foundation, created by the Scientist, a group of psychohistorian mentalists possessing the ability to influence people telepathically, is nothing other than a means of regulating the execution of the plan. Who will return the course of events to the proper path? Exactly. The talented and ambitious mutant mule who succeeded in subjugating the Foundation becomes literally obsessed with the search for the Second Foundation. He understands that rival mentalists will speak to him in the same language. Moreover, they are quite capable of disrupting his plans to conquer and subjugate humanity. On the difficult path to the secret of the Second Foundation, the clever Beta becomes an obstacle, managing to temporarily delay the mule's achievement of his goal. Now the dictator sends his general Han Pritcher and the young aide Baal Chanis to a distant star system, while he himself watches from the sidelines for the time being. The Second Foundation truly exists, and its leadership sees the necessity of successfully concluding the search for the mule. Although this success, of course, will be achieved on their terms. The remote kingdom of Tazenda turns out to be a dreadful backwater, and its main planet has been destroyed by atomic bombardment. Pritcher and Chanis search for enemies in a quiet agrarian world, although gradually even they begin to suspect that in the core worlds of the mule's empire, there are also active agents of the Second Foundation. On agrarian Rossum, Pritcher and Chanis meet the Elders. It is worth saying that the denouement of the search is already near. At some point, it dawns on Pritcher that Chanis himself is an agent of the Second Foundation. The mule appears, driven by the very same idea. Both turn out to be right, but the realization comes too late. Chanis enters into a confrontation with the mule, and it can hardly be called easy. However, a well-prepared agent still has advantages over any talented natural prodigy. The mule loses the mental battle. He returns to his union of worlds, no longer harboring the desire to enslave the universe. It is said that he ruled for a long time, and justly, while the First Foundation on Terminus safely rid itself of his power and influence. They are right when they say that troubles and hardships rarely teach people anything. The First Foundation, having recovered from the yoke of the mutant mentalist, comes to the conclusion that the Second Foundation must be found and destroyed. You see, they influence people telepathically and thereby disrupt Seldon's plan. At this point, the Seekers conclude that the Second Foundation is hiding within the depths of the First itself, right on Terminus. True, to do this they had to engage in a war with Calgon, and consequently with the entire Mule's Union of Worlds. Of course, if the information obtained by the Mule himself cannot be acquired peacefully, then it must be taken by force. The Foundation of Terminus rightly believes that it itself is inferior in power to the Second. People do not want to be puppets of mentalists. However, learning to manage without sacrifices seems to be beyond even the wisest scientists. Dr. Toran invents a device capable of identifying and neutralizing people with telepathic abilities. In this way, 50 agents of the Second Foundation are found and destroyed. The leaders of the Foundation on Terminus calm down, deciding that the enemy has been eliminated and that Seldon's plan has returned to its proper course. By and large, that is exactly what happens. The First Foundation attains stability, while the Second once again retreats into the shadows to control the execution of the plan. A small mistake confounds the Masters of Terminus, who never truly manage to understand their ideological inspirer. Seldon claims that the second foundation was located at the end of the stars. On Terminus, they simply forgot an ancient saying: all roads lead to Trantor, and there too all stars come to an end. Simple and elegant. Two foundations, like two poles, the first in the place of the Empire's weakness, the second in the place of its greatest strength. And now the era of the Foundation has lasted for 500 years. Despite the development of breakthrough technologies, the Foundation on Terminus is steadily moving toward a certain crisis. Seldon's plan must include something else. But what? The advisor to the mayor of Terminus, Golan Trevize, is convinced that the second foundation has not been destroyed at all. He is certain that mental influence on the foundation continues, despite the devices created to block mental influence. Such free thinking is unacceptable, and therefore Trevize is arrested and exiled with the order to find that very second foundation. Accompanying him on the journey is Professor Peloret, obsessed with the idea of finding Earth, the ancient cradle of humanity. Meanwhile, the young speaker of the second foundation, Stor Gendebal, comes to the conclusion that the activities of the second foundation are being manipulated by some external force. The only consolation is that this force seems to act in accordance with Seldon's plan rather than against it. Although this idea finds little support within the second foundation, Gendebal nevertheless sets out in search of the planet from which the mule originated. The suspicion that he was not the only one of his kind there fills the speakers with concern. In the end, both expeditions independently yet simultaneously reach Gaia, a planet that does not exist on any star chart. And indeed, such mules, there are the entire population, and the planet itself as well. The discovered world turns out to be a single organism with a shared consciousness. All animate and inanimate objects within it are interconnected, yet each also possesses its own individuality, and yes, they influence both foundations. Trevize learns that he did not arrive here by chance. He was invited by Gaia itself. As a person endowed with exceptional natural intuition, he must now decide for all of society. What will humanity do next? Gaia offers only three possible choices. Either humanity is governed by the first foundation and its scientific doctrine, or by the second foundation with its mentalist specialists, or one may join Gaia's superintelligence and become an inseparable part of it. In truth, the choice is limited. But Trevize formally agreeing to the assimilation of humanity by Gaia senses a catch. However, Trevize's doubts are based not only on intuition. In their research, he and Peloret discover that all the information about Earth has been erased from the Galactic Library on Trantor. And although Gaia formally denies any involvement, Trevize sincerely doubts its truthfulness. He explains his choice by the fact that the third path of development may be reversible, since the creation of a psychosynchronous galaxy will require a great deal of time. Trevize himself then sets out in search of Earth, vanished from history, in order to resolve his doubts. Together with Trevize, Peloret and Bliss set out on the journey. The latter is a being from Gaia who is in a romantic relationship with the professor. Ahead of the group lies a long road toward unraveling the mystery. First, they arrive on Camporolon. The planet is part of the Foundation Federation, but rather formally than in reality. Its inhabitants are burdened by their subordinate status, since they consider themselves almost the very first descendants of settlers from Earth. The travelers do not receive a warm welcome here. The government wishes to confiscate their advanced spacecraft in order to use its technology to build a military fleet. Still, the visit to Camporolon cannot be called a mistake. While Trevize flirts with a member of the government in order to escape, Peloret and Bliss discover the coordinates of 3 spacer planets. These worlds are considered forbidden, but it is precisely there that one may hope to find the path to Earth. On the first one, Aurora, Trevize and his companions are met only by aggressive beasts. Escaping from them can hardly be called heroism, and there is nothing else to search for here. On the next one, Solaria, the travelers once again find themselves in serious trouble. The planet is inhabited by spacers who have transformed themselves into hermaphrodites. The entire population consists of 1,200 rulers, their few heirs, and service robots. A local inhabitant lures Trevize and his companions into his home, where he first reveals the secret to Earth's destruction at the hands of the spacers, and then attempts to kill them. Bliss's mental abilities save the travelers, and the treacherous host perishes himself. His underage heir is destined to be killed by robots, and the group takes the child with them. The third planet, Melpomania, greets Travis and his companions with a rarefied atmosphere and strange flora. Here, in complete desolation, they discover the remains of 2 cities where the group manages to find the Hall of Worlds, with the coordinates of 50 spacer planets. By performing a certain extrapolation, the travelers calculate how much difficulty the location of 2 suitable star systems. The local flora, however, proves troublesome. It turns out to be remarkably resilient and clingy. Next, Travis and his companions head toward Alpha Centauri. And what joy! People are found here. These are indeed the descendants of the first settlers, who were forced to flee from an infected Earth to the nearest conditionally habitable planet. Everything these people possess has been achieved through terraforming and weather control. The locals tell the guests an ancient history of Earth, skillfully erased from the annals of the galaxy. However, as on all previously visited worlds, no one intends to let the travelers leave the planet alive. Once again, Travis and his companions are forced to flee. Yet now their goal, Earth, is incredibly close. And with it, the answers to all questions. Earth appears before the travelers in a state completely unfit for life. However, intelligent beings are discovered on the moon. What a surprise it is for the reader that here, practically at the end of human history, the robot, Daniel Oliva, is found once again, and our travelers are equally astonished by the knowledge they receive. It turns out that the colonization of the galaxy, the death of Earth, and emergence of Gaia, the creation of Psychohistory, and the foundations are all the work of just one robot. Since ancient times, this exemplar of progress has manipulated the destinies of billions of people. And even now, it is he who arranged Travis's appearance on the moon, because he needs a character accompanied by the honest company from Solaria. Daniel Oliva is convinced that he is simply obliged to observe the creation of Galaxia, the realization of the choice Travis has made. And Travis himself understands that all the psychohistory and the other subtle social sciences would cease to function if some external force were to interfere in human affairs. Should some alien race appear on the horizon, predicting the course of events would become impossible. The entire chain of events spanning several thousand years was driven by the robot's adherence to the Zeroth laws of robotics. A robot may not harm humanity, or, by inaction, allow humanity to come to harm. How much harm such protection can itself cause is something the robot was hardly capable of contemplating. But we will contemplate this. Are robots truly so benevolent towards humanity in the works of Isaac Asimov? By creating the foundation for complex moral choices, the writer gives us food for thought. Is the good of society truly good? Is the salvation of all humanity worth so many intrigues, wars, deaths, and mental enslavement? And how often do we ourselves think about this? And that is all from me. If you enjoyed this video, do not forget to like it, subscribe to the channel, and click the bell. For me, your activity is the greatest reward. Thank you for your attention. See you soon. Goodbye.